The first thing Detective Maria Santos noticed when she stepped into the house at 3312 Carolina Street was the smell. Not the usual odors of neglect or decay that she'd grown accustomed to in her 15 years on the force, but something else entirely, something that made her stomach turn and her instincts scream danger. "Jesus Christ," muttered her partner, Detective Jake Morrison, covering his nose with his sleeve. "What the hell happened here?" The call had come in at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October 2009. Neighbors reported screaming, then sudden, unnatural silence from the Ammons family residence. When officers arrived, they found the front door wide open, swaying in the autumn wind like a mouth gasping for air. Now, standing in what used to be a living room, Santos couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The furniture was overturned, family photos scattered across the floor with their glass faces shattered. But it was the walls that made her blood run cold, scratched and gouged as if something with claws had tried desperately to escape. "Ma'am?" A trembling voice called from behind them. Santos turned to see a young woman clutching a bathrobe around herself, her eyes wide with terror. This was Linda Hartwell, the neighbor who'd made the call. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," Linda whispered, "but I had to tell someone what I saw." "What did you see, Mrs. Hartwell?" Linda's hands shook as she pointed toward the house. "It was around midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I was looking out my bedroom window. That's when I saw her, LaToya, the mother. She was in the yard, but she wasn't. She wasn't walking right." "What do you mean?" "She was walking backwards. Up the side of the house. On the wall." Linda's voice cracked. Like gravity didn't exist for her anymore. Morrison exchanged a glance with Santos. They'd both seen their share of domestic disturbances, drug-related incidents, and mental health crises. But this. "Where's the family now?" Santos asked gently. "I don't know. After the screaming stopped, I saw 3 figures leave the house. But they weren't walking, they were gliding. Like their feet never touched the ground." Inside the house, the investigation revealed more disturbing evidence. In the basement, they found a makeshift altar surrounded by candles burned down to puddles of wax. Strange symbols were carved into the concrete floor, and the air was thick with the residue of something that had been burning, something that wasn't quite incense, wasn't quite sulfur, but somehow both. The children's bedrooms told their own story. Toys were arranged in perfect circles, dolls' heads twisted backward, and crayon drawings covered the walls, disturbing images of dark figures with too many limbs and eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. But it was in the master bedroom that Santos found the journal. The entries, written in LaToya Ammons' handwriting, began normally enough. Complaints about the house being cold, strange odors, minor inconveniences. But as Santos read on, her blood grew colder with each page. March 15th, the children won't stop talking about the man in the basement. They describe him the same way: tall, dark, smiling too wide. I keep telling them there's no one there, but last night I heard footsteps. March 22nd, found all the kitchen knives arranged in a perfect star pattern on the floor this morning. None of us remember doing it. The children's eyes looked different, darker somehow. April 3rd, I can't explain what I saw today. My daughter was having a conversation with empty air, but I could hear another voice responding. When I asked her who she was talking to, she said, "The man who wants to help us leave our bodies." April 10th, the Department of Child Services came today. They think I'm neglecting the children, but they don't understand. Something is in this house with us. Something that doesn't want us to leave. Santos flipped ahead, her hands trembling slightly. April 19th, I caught my son walking up the wall of his bedroom. When I called his name, he turned his head completely around to look at me full 180 degrees. He smiled with someone else's mouth and said, "We don't need your permission anymore." April 24th, the social worker brought a psychologist today. During the interview, both my children began speaking in unison, in a language I've never heard. The psychologist went white and left without finishing the evaluation. She wouldn't tell me what they were saying. The final entries were almost illegible, the handwriting becoming increasingly erratic. April 30th, they're not my children anymore. They float. They know things they shouldn't know. Yesterday, my youngest told me exactly what happened to my mother before she died, details I never shared with anyone. He said she told him. May 2nd, the priest won't come back. After what happened during the blessing, he said our house is beyond salvation. He gave me an address, a place that specializes in cases like ours. I don't want to believe any of this is real. May 5th, we're leaving tonight. Not by choice. They're making us. I can feel them in my head now, moving my thoughts around like furniture. If someone finds this journal, know that whatever happened to us, we didn't go willingly. The address the priest had given was still legible: Dr. Jeffrey Steinberg, clinical psychologist, specializing in unusual psychological phenomena. Santos called the number immediately. Dr. Steinberg agreed to meet them that afternoon. His office was exactly what Santos expected: books on psychology, certificates on the wall, the comfortable leather chairs of someone who listened to people's problems for a living. What she didn't expect was the exhaustion in his eyes when he heard the address. 3312 Carolina Street, he said quietly. I was wondering when someone would call about that house. You know about the Ammons family? I know about many families who lived in that house, Detective. The Ammons were just the most recent. He pulled out a thick file. That house has a history. In the past 30 years, 7 different families have lived there. All of them reported the same phenomena: cold spots, strange odors, children behaving abnormally. 3 families simply vanished. The others. He paused. The others required extensive psychiatric intervention. Dr. Steinberg opened the file to reveal photographs, police reports, and medical records dating back decades. The pattern is always the same. It starts small, minor disturbances, children talking to invisible friends. But it escalates rapidly. Within months, the children begin exhibiting behaviors that defy medical explanation. He showed them a video on his laptop. The timestamp read April 28, 2009, just a week before the Ammons family disappeared. This was taken during a consultation with DCS. They brought the children in for a psychological evaluation. On the screen, 2 young children sat in chairs that looked far too big for them. The boy, maybe 8 years old, stared directly into the camera with eyes that seemed far older than his years. His sister, younger, swung her legs casually as if this were any other doctor's visit. Can you tell me about your imaginary friends? Dr. Steinberg's voice came from behind the camera. The children looked at each other and smiled identical smiles that made Santos' skin crawl. They're not imaginary, the boy said calmly. They're the ones who were here before. They want their house back. What do they look like? Like people, but wrong, the girl chimed in. Too tall, too thin. And they don't have faces, just holes where faces should be. Dr. Steinberg's voice grew more concerned. Do these friends ever ask you to do things? Both children nodded enthusiastically. They teach us how to walk on walls, the boy said. And how to know things about people just by looking at them. Do you want us to tell you something about yourself that we shouldn't know? The video cut off abruptly. What did they say? Morrison asked. Dr. Steinberg was quiet for a long moment. They told me about my daughter's death. Specific details that were never made public. Details that only her mother and I knew. He closed the laptop. That was the last time I saw those children in person. But you continued working with the family? I tried. But the phenomena escalated beyond anything I'd encountered before. The mother, LaToya, began exhibiting signs of what appeared to be multiple personality disorder, but the personalities weren't human. They spoke in languages that linguists at the university couldn't identify. They knew historical events with perfect accuracy, events from centuries ago, from places none of the family had ever been. Dr. Steinberg pulled out another file, this one much thicker. I documented everything. Video recordings, audio files, medical tests. The evidence is disturbing. He showed them photographs of the children taken during the final weeks. In every image, their eyes appeared completely black, not dilated, not bruised, but black as if they were looking into deep water at night. The last time I spoke with LaToya, Dr. Steinberg continued, she was no longer LaToya. Something else was using her voice, her body. It told me that the house had been waiting a long time for the right family, a family with children whose minds were open enough to serve as doorways. Doorways to what? I don't think we want to know the answer to that question, Detective. As they left Dr. Steinberg's office, Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The Emmons case was unlike anything in her experience, but her instincts told her this wasn't over. The phone call came 3 days later. "Detective Santos? This is Chief Rodriguez. We've got another situation. 3312 Carolina Street." Santos' heart sank. "What kind of situation?" "New tenants moved in yesterday. Couple with 2 young kids. This morning, neighbors are reporting the same disturbances, screaming, then silence. Officers arrived to find the house empty, but what? There are fresh scratches on the walls, detective. And the children's toys are arranged in those same circular patterns you documented." Santos and Morrison raced back to the house, dread building in their chests with every mile. When they arrived, the scene was horrifyingly familiar: overturned furniture, shattered photographs, and that same nauseating smell that seemed to permeate everything. But this time, they found something else: a video camera, still recording. The timestamp showed continuous recording from the previous evening through that morning. Santos played it back, watching a normal family go about their evening routine: dinner, television, bedtime stories. The children, a boy and girl roughly the same ages as the Emmons children, seemed perfectly normal. Then, at 11:43 p.m., everything changed. The temperature in the house seemed to drop visibly. Their breath began forming clouds in the air. The children, who should have been asleep, walked out of their bedrooms with the same unnaturally calm expression Santos had seen in Dr. Steinberg's video. They weren't alone. Dark figures moved in the peripheral vision of the camera, shadows that were somehow more substantial than shadows should be. The children began speaking in unison, but the language was unlike anything Santos had ever heard: guttural, ancient, wrong. The parents appeared in the hallway, but their movements were jerky, puppet-like, as if something else was controlling their bodies. The mother turned toward the camera, and for just a moment, her face was visible. Her eyes were completely black. The video continued for several more hours, showing the family moving through the house in patterns that made no logical sense, walking through walls, defying gravity, their bodies contorting in ways that should have been impossible. At 6:33 a.m., they simply left. Not through the front door or any visible exit, but fading away like smoke, leaving only the destruction behind. Santos ejected the camera's memory card with shaking hands. The evidence was undeniable now, but she knew that no court would accept it, no rational person would believe it. But she also knew something else: the house was still hungry. That night, Santos drove back to Carolina Street alone. She couldn't explain why. Some combination of professional duty and morbid fascination drew her there. She parked across the street and watched the dark windows, looking for any sign of movement. At exactly midnight, lights began appearing in the windows, not electric lights, but something else, something that cast shadows in directions that defied physics. And in those shadows, Santos could see shapes moving, gathering. The house was preparing for its next family. She reached for her radio to call for backup, but stopped when she realized something that made her blood freeze: there was a "for rent" sign on the front lawn that hadn't been there that morning. Someone was already planning to move in. Santos started her car and drove away, knowing she would return. The Deliverance wasn't a single event, it was an ongoing harvest, and 3312 Carolina Street would never be satisfied. Behind her, in the rearview mirror, she saw a small figure standing in the upstairs window, waving goodbye. The figure had no face. Detective Santos submitted her final report on the Carolina Street incidents 3 weeks later. The case remains officially unsolved. The house at 3312 Carolina Street was condemned by the city and scheduled for demolition, but construction crews reported equipment failures and unexplained injuries. The demolition was postponed indefinitely. As of this writing, the house still stands. It has been empty for 6 months. The "for rent" sign remains on the front lawn. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.